And this is what so many of us do so much of the time. We are running this life marathon like it's a sprint. And in our sprinting, the only focus we have is on the next right step in front of us so we don't fall. Hey there, my name is Vanessa Kaiser. I'm a ranch girl turned social worker turned business leader turned entrepreneur. I love to explore all things organization, leadership, growth, inspiration, and efficiency. There's a phrase we use a lot around here called rhythmic living, which I define as the continuous cycle of assessing what season of life we're in and how we create habits, routines, and processes that support our current season. This show is for business owners, leaders, mamas, aunties, sisters, and friends who want to grow and live inspired. Welcome to the Inspiring Heights podcast. I am a huge fan of the Enneagram personality test. I've used it a ton in leadership and management of humans over the past 5+ years, and I've also used it to learn to name some things about myself that are maybe a little bit harder to put into words. I am an Enneagram 2, known as the helper. I thrive on serving others and feeling needed myself. One of the growth areas Enneagram 2s have is in naming what their needs are. We are quick to be on the lookout for both assessing and working to meet the needs of those around us, but we tend to be very slow to have much introspection for what our own needs are. And though this is an emphasized growth area for us as Enneagram 2s, as I have worked with people in my career, I've learned that there are very few who are proficient at identifying and naming their needs. We have a hard time getting our needs met if we're unable to name them. And here's the thing about our needs. We all have them. For those of you who might be tempted to wander down a rabbit hole about wanting to be selfless and focus on others, not yourself, hear me out. You have needs. You need to eat. You need to sleep. You need to be heard. You need to feel loved. You need time to rest. And those are really just the basics. But sometimes even those basic things, we struggle to identify and speak out loud. It's hard to thrive in any area of our life when our needs there are not being met. So in today's show, I'm going to share 3 reasons why we struggle to name or even identify what our needs are, and 3 tips on how to start identifying and sharing our needs with the right people. First step on our list of why we don't/can't share our needs. We don't make space or time to identify what they are. The year that Ben and I got engaged, I was living in a 2nd-story apartment with wooden stairs on the outside up to my door. One night, I got snow and I didn't have time the next morning to scoop it off before I headed out the door. I also, for some reason that day, decided to wear a pair of Tom's slip-on shoes with absolutely no tread on the bottom. You see where my story is headed here. I slipped on the stairs and I caught myself with my foot pointed down like a ballerina. I lost my big toenail, and my foot was just never quite the same. For those of you who don't know me very well, I'm not a huge fan of doctors. Okay, let me be honest. I make every effort to not have to go to the doctor. So, of course, I never scheduled x-rays to make sure that there was nothing broken or torn in my foot. As the years went on, I just lived with the pain that it caused me after being on my feet for too many hours at one time. That is until this fall. We were remodeling our house, and I was so tired of living in pain weekend after weekend, and I decided it was time to do something about it. My parents had found a lady who is actually an equine chiropractor who has learned a lot about humans in her career. She worked wonders for my parents, so I decided to give the old horse doctor a try. As we reached the end of my examination, she was quizzing me about how I was feeling overall. She was recommending a supplement and naming some of the specific areas that the supplement would help: overall energy, reducing brain fog, aches and pains, etc., etc. She asked me if any of those areas rang a bell with me, and I just shrugged my shoulders. She asked what my stress level was, and I was honest with her. It was a 10. There was so much going on in life, and I was totally maxed out. And I remember her saying something that, to be honest, at the time kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But as time has gone on, I've come to really appreciate. She said, "You're so stressed out, you don't even know that you don't feel good. You don't even know that you don't feel good." As we moved to the ranch and I put my month's notice in at work and I started to get my house in order, the stress began to reduce. And as the stress reduced, my body relaxed, my foot stopped hurting, my energy levels went up, and my overall body felt like the weight of the world had been lifted. The horse doctor was right. I was going so hard and so fast for so long, I didn't even know that I didn't feel good. And this is what so many of us do so much of the time. We are running this life marathon like it's a sprint. And in our sprinting, the only focus we have is on the next right step in front of us so we don't fall. We aren't considering what we need to be nourished or cared for or inspired. We don't pause the running for things like that. But we should, because eventually we will collapse. If we don't get nourishment for our body, our hearts, and our minds, we will run out of fuel, plain and simple. And that refueling of ourselves, well, that, my friend, is called a need. Reason number 2, we don't think anyone really cares about our needs. This isn't a victim martyr mentality thing, it's a human thing. Or perhaps even more specifically, it's an American thing. We are an incredibly self-reliant society. We have been led to believe that relying on anyone else is weak and dangerous. And we need to be strong enough to do everything we need to do in our life all on our own. But my oh my, what a lonely world that lie leads us to. It just simply isn't true. It's not. We weren't meant to live individualistically. We were meant to live in community. We were meant to have people around us who can help us, encourage us, speak truth over us, hold us accountable, and inspire us. We will never get comfortable sharing our needs with others if we don't kick this lie in the teeth. It's not all about meeting all of my own needs in my own strength. It's about leaning into a safe community of people who work together to meet one another's needs. Finally, reason number 3. We just don't see a way for our needs to be met, even if we express them to the right person. There are sometimes seasons of life when we know we need something, but it seems like even the most supportive and in-tune spouse, friend, or neighbor can't make it happen. There are simply too many obstacles and mountains sitting right in front of our needs. This fall, as we were pushing to get part 1 done of our renovation in time for us to move in December, we were literally burning the candle at both ends of the stick, working long-hour work weeks and then driving 3 hours on Friday night to work on the house until Sunday afternoon, at which time we would get in the car and drive 3 hours home and start the week all over again. Both Ben and I were in desperate need of rest, but we didn't talk about it too much. It was like this unspoken understanding that we were dead tired, worn out, beat. But it didn't matter because the mountain in front of us could only be moved by climbing, or in our case, painting and putting together kitchen cabinets. I've actually been reflecting on this quite a bit as I prepared for this podcast episode, because while the work needing done here wasn't going to do itself, there were needs we could have asked one another, our coworkers, and honestly, even the people we were doing life with to help us meet. But we didn't see the point, because we couldn't see the trees through the forest. Whether it's a full season, a season of plenty, or a season of need, sometimes we are blinded by what can seem like insurmountable obstacles in front of us. Yet we know, once again, we can climb and run and push as hard as we want without naming our needs and asking for help. But eventually, we will collapse. So how do we pivot? How do we release the lies and the fear and the unmanageable paces of life to give enough space to thinking about, identifying, and naming our needs? You know the old adage, You won't do something for very long unless you start seeing results quickly. This is why Dave Ramsey promotes the debt snowball method for getting rid of debt. You start with the smallest debt you owe, you pay it off, you mark it off on your list, you get an instant hit of dopamine, which leads to instant gratification, and then you're ready to go after that next one. And we claim Gen Zers are needy for wanting instant gratification. No, the truth is we all want it. Most of us aren't afraid of a little hard work. We just want to know that the hard work is paying off, and we want to know it quickly. Naming our needs can be hard work, so we need to choose wisely where we start to ensure that we're picking up wins and thus momentum right away. This leads me to my first tip for naming our needs. Choose the right people. I recently did an Instagram Facebook story on being cautious of who we are sharing our most intimate information with, our hopes and dreams and insecurities and failures. Not everyone can hold that information well. Not every relationship we have supports the weight of those heavy things. And if we want to build and maintain healthy relationships, we need to be wise with the information that we're sharing. The same concept applies to our needs. It's interesting, but even when we have deeply trusted people in our lives, like a spouse, a close friend, a family member, a roommate, we sometimes have a tendency to place our needs in the wrong conversation. And altogether too often in those conversations, they aren't presented as an ask, but rather as a complaint. We were at the grocery store a couple of weeks ago, and as we moved through the self-checkout line, there was this clerk talking to a few customers about how lazy her husband was. She made a few comments referencing the amount of work that she did in the house and the lack of work he contributed to their home. While I work really hard to not speak of my husband in that way, I have been guilty of expressing a need through a tone of complaint versus a vulnerable posture of asking. It's much easier to complain to someone who will listen than to risk the right person not responding in the way you hoped as you share a need. That's why we carefully select who we share our more deep and personal needs with. In the same vein of choosing the right people, we need to be mindful to direct our asks to the appropriate person. If I'm feeling really overwhelmed at work and the need identified is help on a project or a little time off, I need to talk with the person at work who has the power and authority to provide for that need. Though Ben is my absolute favorite human on the earth and would move the moon and stars for me, he can't get me help at work or authorize time off. Expressing that need to him expecting action is going to leave both of us frustrated and feeling stuck. Likewise, if I am needing rest at home, maybe I need help around the house, or we need to not make any plans for a couple of weeks while we catch up on much needed rest, expressing that need to Ben would make the most sense. So we choose wisely. We share deep needs thoughtfully with people we can trust, people we have a strong enough relationship with that can withstand the weight of the need we're placing on it. And we direct our needs to the right people, the ones who can actually help us. Both practices will help us to achieve the needed quick wins when it comes to expressing our needs and having people respond in a positive way. Tip number 2, get specific about your needs. I remember the first work retreat I helped put on at the firm. It was a huge 2-day event, 3 if you count the setup for us committee members. We worked hard from early in the morning until late at night. And I remember as I was preparing to head into that week, I sat down and had a very open and honest conversation with Ben. We talked about the coming week and how very full it was going to be. And I asked him for a few very specific things. I asked if he could make sure all of his dishes were done and the house was picked up when I got home each day so that I could relax and go straight to bed in preparation for the next day. I told him I would be home for dinner one night in the middle of the week, and I asked if he could handle making preparations to put dinner on the table that night. And then I asked him to be gracious with me as we went into the next 3 days. All of my attention and focus was going to be on the event. It was an event that we had been planning for 9 months and the first one of this size. And I knew it needed to go well and it was going to take all of my attention. And do you know what happened that week? Ben did the dishes and made sure the house was picked up each night when I got home. He was patient when it took hours for me to respond to a text message. He took care of dinner on that Wednesday night for both of us and took care of his own dinners on Monday and Tuesday night. He greeted me each evening with a warm embrace. He understood that I was tapped and ready to sleep as soon as I crossed the threshold. So though those 3 days were intense, Ben was able to meet my needs in that punch time because I specifically named them. And he was happy to do it because he completely understood what it was that I needed. And not only were my needs met, but giving Ben those specifics helped him to have realistic expectations of the 3 days ahead of us. And those realistic expectations play a significant part in another person helping to meet our needs. When we go into conversations about what our needs are, we can sometimes tend to forego the specifics. Sometimes it's because we're feeling a little nervous or shy. We're not sure how someone's going to respond to the request. Other times we maybe think that the person that we're asking the request of probably already knows what we're asking for, and we don't need to bore them with the granular details. The reality is, it's hard for people to fully meet our needs if they don't completely understand what they are. We can help the person that we are asking and ourselves by being aware and willing to provide specifics on what it is that we're asking for. Tip number 3, reflect and respond when it isn't going well. Sometimes our needs aren't going to be met. We can go to great lengths to consider what they are, share them with the right people, give very specific details, and still, as humans, we will fail and we will be failed. The key here when this happens is that we take pause and reflect on what went wrong, and we talk about it with the person. These situations can be created by a whole slew of things: miscommunication, misrepresentation of our needs, lack of honesty, lack of trust, lack of trying, lack of ability to receive help, etc., etc. Whether it's your business or your home, to keep building trust and relationships with those around us, we have to be willing to talk about it when we feel let down. Be respectful, be inquisitive, use I statements, speak in facts. But do, in fact, speak. Do talk about it. Do hear what they have to say as well. And together, you can pave a path forward. Friends, we all have needs. Let's get intentional about naming them and sharing them with the right people. And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Do you have questions, comments, or insights on today's content? I would love to hear from you. You can DM me on Facebook or Instagram, or head over to our website, inspiringheights.org, and click on the Contact Us form. I will link all those locations here in the show notes. P.S. If you haven't already, I would love for you to leave a 5-star rating and a quick review of the podcast. This helps get our content in the hands of new listeners. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter and follow us on social media for rhythmic doses of inspiration. All right, friends, take a deep breath and be inspired where your feet are. Bye for now.